I worked the night shift at a Circle K convenience store just outside Austin, Texas, during my second year of college. The pay was decent enough for what it was, and honestly, I got used to the weird characters pretty quick. You see all kinds of people between midnight and 6 in the morning. Drunks stumbling in for beer they definitely did not need. Homeless folks asking for change or trying to warm up by the coffee machine. Teenagers sneaking cigarettes when they thought I was not paying attention. I had my share of tense moments too. People getting aggressive over stupid things like us being out of their favorite energy drink or not accepting their clearly expired coupon. I have been threatened a handful of times, had someone try to walk out without paying more than once. And yeah, the training we got made it clear that we were supposed to cooperate if things got really bad. But there was one night back in March of last year that still keeps me up sometimes. That was the only time I felt genuinely terrified, and it was not even fear for myself. It was fear for someone else. I do not tell this story much because part of me worries it sounds like I am trying to paint myself as some kind of hero, and I really do not feel that way. I just did what anyone should do in that situation. The thing is, I think more people need to know what to look for. Maybe if enough of us pay attention, we can help someone who desperately needs it. So here is what happened. It was a Wednesday night, or technically Thursday morning, around 3. The store was dead quiet. I had been restocking shelves and checking expiration dates on the sandwiches in the cooler, just trying to stay busy. That is when I heard the door chime. I looked up to see an old pickup truck, maybe from the early 2000s, pulling up to one of the gas pumps outside. A man stepped through the door first. He looked to be in his early 50s, wearing a faded flannel shirt and a dirty baseball cap. Right behind him was a young woman, early 20s I would guess, wearing an oversized gray hoodie with the hood pulled up. Her head was down, and she shuffled in behind him without looking up. The man smiled real big and said, "Howdy, still open, right?" His voice was loud, almost too friendly. I told him, "Yeah, we are open 24/7. He gave me a thumbs up and headed toward the back where we keep the drinks. The girl followed him silently. I walked back to the register and waited, but something felt off. I could not put my finger on it right away, but the way he was acting, it was like he was trying too hard to seem normal. You know that feeling when someone is being overly friendly and it just feels forced? That was it. And the girl had not said a single word. She just trailed behind him like a shadow. I watched them on the security monitor behind the counter. They walked around the store for about 5 minutes. He grabbed a 6-pack of beer and a couple bags of chips. She stood near the soda aisle but did not pick anything up. Every so often she would glance toward the front of the store, toward me, but then quickly look away. The man always seemed to position himself between her and the exit. At one point she reached for a bottle of water and I heard him say, "You don't need that, let's go." His tone had changed. It was not friendly anymore. It was flat, controlling. She flinched slightly, nodded, and put the bottle back. They started walking toward the register. That is when I got a better look at her face. The man placed his items on the counter and started talking about the weather, how it had been unusually warm for March, just small talk. I scanned the beer and chips, trying to act normal, but I kept glancing at the girl. Her head was still down, hood up, hands shoved into the front pocket of her hoodie. When the man turned slightly to pull out his wallet, she looked up. Our eyes met for just a second, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear. Her lips were trembling. She gave a tiny shake of her head, so small that if I had blinked I would have missed it. Then she slowly pulled one hand out of her pocket and held it low near her waist, where he could not see. With her fingers she spelled out the letters. HELP. It only lasted a few seconds before the man turned back around, and she immediately dropped her hand and looked down again. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I forced myself to stay calm and said, "That'll be 1847. He handed me a $20 bill, but my mind was racing. I could not just call the cops right in front of him. We did not have a silent alarm button like banks do. I needed to buy time. I held the bill up to the light and said, "Sir, this bill looks a bit worn. Let me check it real quick." I grabbed the counterfeit detector pen we kept under the register and made a show of testing it. He shifted his weight and said, "Come on, man, it's fine. I got it from the ATM." I nodded and said, "Sorry, store policy had some counterfeit issues lately." The girl stood completely still, staring at the floor. I reached for my phone, pretending to text my manager about the bill, but I opened the local police department's emergency tip app instead. I typed the store address and the words "emergency silent" as fast as I could without looking like I was panicking. I hit send and set the phone down. Then I made a point of holding the bill up one more time before finally putting it in the register. I counted out his change slowly, placed the items in a plastic bag, and asked, "You folks need a receipt?" He snatched the bag and said, "No, we're good." His voice had an edge to it now, like he was getting impatient. They turned and headed for the door. I called out, "Drive safe out there," and watched them walk to the truck. I made a mental note of the license plate. Texas plates starting with the letters BKF. As soon as they were outside, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, and I spoke quietly but urgently. I told her there was a young woman in the store who signaled for help, described the man, the truck, the plate number, everything I could remember. She asked if I was certain, and I said yes, absolutely. She told me to stay inside, lock the door, and that a unit was 3 minutes away. I moved to the window and looked out. They were still at the pump. He was filling up the tank. She sat in the passenger seat, motionless. 2 minutes passed. Then I saw the flash of red and blue lights coming down the highway. 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot, one blocking the exit, the other pulling up right behind the truck. The man saw them and tried to jump into the driver's seat, but the second patrol car cut him off before he could even start the engine. Officers got out with their hands on their weapons, shouting commands. He put his hands up. One officer pulled him out and cuffed him while another opened the passenger door and spoke to the girl. She got out slowly, and even from where I stood, I could see her shoulders shaking. They walked her to one of the patrol cars, but not the one he was in. An officer came into the store and asked for my statement. I unlocked the door and let him in. I walked him through everything, showed him the footage on the security system, explained the way she signaled, the way he controlled her movements, his behavior. The officer nodded and wrote it all down. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. The girl was 19 years old. She had been reported missing from Oklahoma 3 days earlier. The man had an active warrant for kidnapping. If they had left that parking lot, there was a good chance no one would have found her. The officer said I did exactly the right thing, staying calm, not confronting the man, getting the information to them quickly. He thanked me and told me she would be reunited with her family and would get the help she needed. After they left, I sat behind that counter for the rest of my shift in complete silence. I could not stop thinking about it. What if I had not been paying attention? What if I had been in the back room when they came in? What if she had not been brave enough to signal me? For weeks after that, I barely slept. I kept imagining all the people out there who do not get that chance. The ones who try to signal for help but nobody notices. The ones who are too scared to even try. I still think about her sometimes, and I hope she is okay. I hope she is healing. And that is why I am telling this story now. Not because I want credit, but because I want people to pay attention. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. If you see someone who looks like they need help, do not ignore it. You might be the only chance they have got. It only takes a few seconds to make a call, to ask a question, to notice something is not right. Those few seconds could save a life. I need to start this by saying I don't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural like that. I've always been the kind of person who looks for logical explanations before jumping to conclusions. But I'm also not going to sit here and pretend I can explain everything that happened to me that night. I worked as a nurse at Memorial General Hospital for 3 years, mostly taking night shifts because the pay was better and I needed the money. Those shifts were usually quiet, just a few emergency cases rolling in here and there. The hospital itself was this massive 12-story building that felt almost abandoned after midnight. What I'm about to tell you happened on a night that started like any other, but ended with me questioning everything I thought I knew about that place. Memorial General was built back in the 1960s, and you could tell. The whole building had this old institutional feel to it, with long hallways that seemed to stretch forever under flickering fluorescent lights. Floor 7 used to be the intensive care unit until about 2 years before this happened. They moved everything to a brand new unit on floor 4, which was state-of-the-art compared to the old setup. Floor 7 was supposed to be renovated and turned into administrative offices, but budget cuts kept pushing those plans back. So it just sat there, empty, with all the old hospital beds still in the rooms and outdated medical equipment gathering dust. The weirdest part was that the old nurse call bell system was still powered on because it shared the same electrical circuit as floor 6, and nobody had bothered to disconnect it. Each patient room had one of those small rectangular windows in the door so you could look inside without opening it. Most of the staff avoided going up there unless they absolutely had to. There was just something about floor 7 that felt off, like the air was heavier or the silence was too complete. I'd been up there a handful of times to grab supplies from the storage room they kept at the end of the hall, and every single time I felt this uncomfortable chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. My coworker Sarah had told me a few months back that she heard strange noises up there during her shift, but I just laughed it off. I figured she was letting her imagination run wild because she was working alone. I wish I had listened to her. The night it happened, my shift started at 11 p.m. like always. It was me, 2 other nurses, and 1 doctor on call for the entire hospital. It was a Tuesday, which meant it was usually dead quiet, and that night was no exception. We only had 2 minor emergency cases come in before 2 in the morning, nothing serious. I was stationed at the nurse's desk on floor 5, catching up on paperwork and trying not to fall asleep. Around 2:30 a.m., one of the patient monitors started acting up and displaying error messages. We had a backup monitor stored up on floor 7 in the equipment closet, so naturally everyone looked at me since I was the only guy on duty that night. I grabbed the keys from the supervisor, checked my phone battery, saw it was at 40%, and headed for the elevator. I wasn't thrilled about going up there, but I wasn't about to make a big deal out of it either. The elevator ride felt slower than usual, like it was struggling to reach floor 7. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into that familiar hallway. The fluorescent lights were buzzing louder than I remembered, making this annoying humming sound that seemed to echo off the walls. The air smelled stale, like nobody had opened a window in years. I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m. The storage room was at the far end of the hall, so I started walking, my footsteps squeaking on the old linoleum floor. I was about halfway down the corridor when I heard it. Ding, ding, ding. The sound of a nurse call bell going off. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart immediately jumping into my throat. The sound was coming from room 714, which was on my left. I knew for a fact there were no patients on this floor. The whole place had been empty for 2 years. I stood there, frozen, listening as the bell continued to ring for a few more seconds before stopping. I tried to tell myself it was just an electrical malfunction, that the old wiring was probably shorting out or something. I started walking again, a little faster this time, just wanting to grab the monitor and get out of there. Then the bell in room 718 started ringing. My hands were sweating now. I turned and looked at the door to 718. It had that small observation window, just like all the other rooms. I don't know what made me do it, but I walked over to the door and looked through the glass. The room was dark except for a little bit of light coming in from the hallway. I could see the old hospital bed, the empty chair in the corner, and the call bell unit mounted on the wall with its little red light glowing. But then, just for a split second, I saw something move near the window on the far side of the room. It was just a shadow, a shift in the darkness, but it was enough to make me stumble backward. The bell stopped ringing. My first instinct was to get back to that elevator and forget about the monitor, but as I turned around, the bell in room 714 started up again. Then 716, then 720, then 722. Within seconds, it sounded like every call bell on the entire floor was going off at once. the noise echoing down the empty hallway in this horrible chorus of dings that made my skin crawl. I started walking fast toward the elevator, my breath coming quicker now. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were soft, like someone walking barefoot on the linoleum, but they were definitely there, and they were behind me. I stopped and spun around, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The hallway was empty. Nothing. Nobody. But the footsteps had been so clear. I started moving again, and the footsteps started again too, matching my pace, getting closer. I could feel the presence of someone right behind me, so close I expected to feel a hand on my shoulder any second. I whipped around again and shouted into the empty air. "Who is there?" My voice cracked a little, which made me feel embarrassed even though I was terrified. The footsteps stopped. The call bells went silent. All I could hear was that buzzing from the fluorescent lights and my own ragged breathing. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the hallway. Nothing but empty corridor and closed doors. But I could still feel it, that sensation of being watched, of not being alone up here. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the radio clipped to my scrubs and pressed the call button. "Security, this is floor 7. Can you check the cameras up here?" My voice sounded thin and scared even to my own ears. The radio crackled and Mike, the security guard on duty, responded immediately. "Floor 7, what are you doing up there? Everything okay?" I tried to steady my breathing before answering. "I'm hearing things. The nurse call bells are going off and I'm hearing footsteps, but there's nobody up here." There was a pause, then Mike said, "Hold on, let me pull up those cameras." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour even though it was probably only 30 seconds. I stood there next to the elevator, my thumb hovering over the call button, ready to bolt at the first sign of anything weird. The radio crackled again and Mike's voice came through. "Yeah, I see movement on the hall camera. Northeast corner near room 722. I felt my stomach drop. Part of me was relieved that I wasn't losing my mind, but another part of me was absolutely terrified because that meant someone or something really was up here with me. "Can you see who it is?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Image is fuzzy, keeps cutting in and out. But yeah, something's moving around up there. I'm coming up right now. Stay near the elevator." I didn't need to be told twice. I pressed myself against the wall next to the elevator doors and kept my eyes locked on the hallway. That's when every single call bell started ringing again, all at once, louder than before. And then I heard the footsteps again, but this time they weren't slow and steady. They were running, fast, coming straight toward me from the end of the hallway. I looked in the direction of the sound but saw absolutely nothing, just empty space. But those footsteps kept getting closer and closer, and I could swear I felt the air move like someone was sprinting right at me. I slammed my hand on the elevator button, and the doors opened immediately. I practically threw myself inside and started jabbing the close door button over and over, my whole body shaking. I was sitting in the small security office, third night in a row working the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. The job was usually quiet, just required me to patrol once every 2 hours. Tonight was Wednesday, and the industrial park was emptier than usual. I had just finished making my second cup of coffee, glanced at the clock, and saw it was 2:15 in the morning. I was getting ready to start my next patrol round when I heard something strange coming from warehouse number 7. A soft metallic clinking sound. There was never anyone there at this hour. Something felt wrong, and that feeling started creeping up my spine. I grabbed my flashlight, locked the security office behind me, and started walking toward warehouse 7. This warehouse belonged to a shipping company, and they always locked up after 6 p.m. As I got closer, I noticed the back door was open just a crack. The lights inside were all off like usual, but that door was definitely open. I stopped and listened carefully. I could hear voices inside, low and quiet, at least 2 people. My heart started beating faster. My first thought was theft. There had been 3 robberies in this industrial park over the past 2 months. I reached for my radio, about to report this to my supervisor. But before I pressed the button, I heard laughter. Casual laughter, not the kind you'd expect from thieves. I decided to get closer and confirm what was happening. I pushed the door open gently and shined my flashlight inside. Two men were standing next to a pile of cardboard boxes, and they both jumped and turned around. One looked about 40 years old, wearing a leather jacket. The other was younger, wearing a hoodie. I asked them what they were doing here and if they had permission. The older man laughed and said they were maintenance workers, just finished fixing the electrical system. I knew for certain this was wrong. All maintenance work was scheduled in advance, and I had the list. No one was allowed to work at 2 in the morning without notice. I asked them for their company name, and the man replied Apex Electrical Services. I had never heard that name on the approved contractor list. The younger guy stood still, not saying anything, just staring at me with tense eyes. I asked them to show me their work permits. The older man patted his pockets and said he forgot them in the car. I told them to go get them, and I would wait here. The two men walked toward the door, and I followed behind them. The younger guy kept looking back at me, his hands fidgeting near his waist. When we got outside, I did not see any vehicle parked near the warehouse. I asked them where their car was, and the older man pointed toward the other end of the industrial park. He said they parked outside the main gate because they did not want to disturb anyone. This made even less sense. Contractors were always allowed to park inside the complex. I started gripping my radio tighter and told them I needed to call my supervisor to confirm. The older man suddenly changed his tone and said, "Listen, buddy, no need to make this complicated." He stepped closer to me, his attitude shifting from friendly to threatening. "We are just working. Nobody gets hurt. You just do your job." I took a step back, keeping my distance. The younger guy started circling around to my left. I realized they were trying to surround me. My heart was pounding hard, and my hands started shaking slightly. I pressed the radio button and called my supervisor, saying I had a situation at Warehouse 7 and needed assistance. My supervisor replied that he would call the police right away. The older man heard this, and his face changed. "Why did you do that? We have not done anything." I told them clearly they were trespassing and needed to leave immediately. The younger guy started backing up toward the warehouse. The older man tried to stall for time, asking me how long I had been working security if the pay was good. I did not answer, just demanded they walk to the main gate and wait for police. The younger guy had already disappeared back into the warehouse. The man said, "All right, fine, we are leaving." But he did not walk toward the gate. He followed the other guy back into the warehouse. I shouted, "Stop, go toward the gate." He ignored me and kept walking fast. I had to make a decision. Chase after them or stay outside and wait for police. Thinking about my responsibility to protect the property, I followed them into the warehouse. The biggest mistake I made that night. Inside the warehouse it was dark, only my flashlight beam cutting through the black. I heard running sounds toward the back of the warehouse. I shouted a warning for them to stand still. Police were coming. The sound stopped. Then suddenly the warehouse lights flipped on, bright and blinding. I had to squint, losing a few seconds adjusting. When I opened my eyes, I saw both men standing next to a small truck parked at the rear door of the warehouse, a door I could not see from outside. The truck bed was already loaded full of cardboard boxes. They were stealing merchandise. The older man yelled, "You should not have come in here." The younger guy jumped into the truck and started the engine. The older man ran forward and shoved a tall storage shelf toward me. The shelf started tipping, boxes falling down. I dove to the side, barely avoiding the falling shelf. But a heavy cardboard box hit my right shoulder, and I went down hard on the concrete floor. Sharp pain shot through my shoulder. I heard the truck engine roar as it sped away. Lying on the ground, I tried to get up. The older man had already run outside and jumped into the truck. The vehicle was racing toward the back gate. I could only catch a blurry glimpse of the license plate through my flashlight beam. I sat up, my shoulder throbbing and numb. I grabbed my radio and reported the situation. The thieves had escaped. I was injured but not seriously. My supervisor said police were 3 minutes away. I stood up slowly and walked outside. Looking around the warehouse, I saw many more boxes had been opened. They had been here for a while, clearly had a solid plan. I sat down on the doorstep and waited for police. I thought about my decision to chase them. I should have waited outside. But if I had done that, they still would have taken all the merchandise and gotten away. I felt helpless. 5 minutes later, police lights appeared. Two officers got out of their car and asked about the situation. I told them everything, described both men and the truck. One officer radioed for units to look out for the vehicle. The other officer asked if I was seriously hurt, if I needed an ambulance. I said I was fine, just a bruised shoulder. They went inside to check the scene, taking photos and notes. My supervisor showed up, concerned and asking if I was okay. He said I had done well, the important thing was staying safe. But I still felt like I had failed. Police stayed until morning, filing their reports. I finished my shift and got off at 6 a.m. On the drive home, I kept replaying everything in my head. I realized I was lucky. They only wanted to steal merchandise. They did not want to seriously hurt anyone. If they had weapons, things could have been much worse. 2 days later, my supervisor called with news. The police had caught both men. They were part of a professional theft ring. They had committed 7 similar robberies over 3 months. The license plate I saw helped police track them down. Most of the stolen goods had been recovered. The company sent me a letter thanking me, praising me for raising the alarm in time. I learned an important lesson. Sometimes doing your job right does not mean you have to be a hero. Calling for backup was the smartest decision I made. My shoulder healed after 2 weeks. I went back to working night shifts, but now I was more careful, and I always remembered to call for help before taking action. Tonight, sitting in the security office watching the camera screens, I felt grateful that things had not turned out worse. Night shift work was still quiet, but I would never forget that danger could appear at any moment.